If you want to start scanning your own film, there are two main options: buying a scanner, or you can start camera scanning. If you pick the camera scanning option, it gets complex fast, but it seems there is an easy option for 35mm, the Valoi Easy 35. When you get into camera scanning, it seems to be a great idea. Use your digital camera to scan film and it's faster and better quality compared to a flatbed or a dedicated film scanner. But with camera scanning, it's the setup that gets you. Keeping the film, light and lens perfectly parallel is very tricky, and any errors can ruin your scans. These problems is what led me to building this monstrosity of a scanning rig built around scanning lenses, bellows and the negative supply film holders. And it does give me excellent, reliable, repeatable results. But building something like this is quite far out of reach for a lot of people. But this Valoi Easy 35 might make all of this pointless, for 35mm at least, because it handles everything this does as long as you bring your own camera and macro lens. So the idea behind this is that it attaches a complete scanning rig directly to the lens and removes the need for any copy stands or tripods or aligning any parts together. This just contains everything and it screws straight onto the front of the lens. So let's take a look at how it does it. This is the basic setup kit, and inside we have our setup guide. We have the extension tubes, or filter thread extension tubes, that we're going to use later. Got a USB-C charging cable, a selection of step up and step down rings so you can attach these tubes to the lens, and then we have the Easy 35 itself. So because I'm a man's man, a courageous man who likes to look his enemy dead in the eye through the scope of a high-powered rifle from 2 towns over, I won't be needing the instructions. So if we take a look at the actual Easy 35 unit itself, we can see where we can screw on the various filter rings in order to attach this to the lens. We've got a knob here on the top which we can loosen, and that allows us to rotate the unit around so that the film is lined up properly with the camera sensor. On the side here we have a removable insert. So this is the actual film transport track that you pull the film through manually, and this is just the basic 35mm one. I would assume that in the future this will have, 110 or maybe APS-C variants. I'm sure they're going to bring out a full sprocket variant as well, so you'll be able to scan the borders a bit better. And that just slides in. Then on the back of the unit, on the light source itself, we have 2 controls. We have a power switch, so we just turn that, and that acts also as a brightening control. We also have a color temperature control, so we can change it from about daylight to a more orange, warm white light as well, if that helps your scanning. And then also on the back we have our battery level indicator, which is just 4 red LEDs, and a charging port, which is USB-C, so we can charge up the light easily. So to demo it, I'm going to be using my Z8. Obviously this is completely overkill, but it's a camera I have to hand. And as for the lens, I'm going to use the 60mm AFD Micro Nikkor, which is a really nice lens, and it's quite compatible with the F to Z adapter as well. Now, because this is a full frame camera, we need the macro lens to be set at 1:1 magnification and have the film at the correct distance from the sensor. So in order to figure out how many tubes we need to use, we need to figure out how far away from the sensor that the film needs to be. And this is actually really easy. All we need to do is set the lens to 1:1, and it tells us here on our focal distance scale that it's 0.219 meters, so about 22 centimeters. And you measure that 22 centimeters from the sensor plane of the camera, which is indicated by this little circle with a line through it mark. We want to have it a little bit further back because we don't want it to be a perfect 1:1. We want to scan a little bit of border, so somewhere around here will be fine. About 22 centimeters away, so it should be about right. So we're just going to feed in some film. This is an uncut roll of FPP Sun, which is an ISO 1 film. So if you look over here, we can see the framing is not actually 100% perfect, but we're limited in how much we can move this back and forward. So it's about right, and it'll let us get a nice bit of border as well. And because this is a 45 megapixel camera, we can crop the image in if we need to without losing any quality. So in order to stop down to the lens's sharpest point at 1:1, we need to stop down the lens to f13. And now we're ready to start capturing our negatives. So we're just going to Take that shot. Now we're just going to slide the film into place and we'll scan the whole roll. And the light is actually quite bright, so at ISO 64 I'm getting 1/40th of a second at f13, which is quite nice. Now you might ask yourself why I'm using a remote if the whole thing is screwed together. You know, any vibration will not affect it, but there is a tiny bit of flex in this whole unit, so using a remote will just eliminate any possibility of vibrations. And there we have it. So now I'm going to take these into Lightroom and process them. Now of course the EZ35 is designed to be used like this, attached to a macro lens, but I do want to see how well it performs on my scanning lens, so I'm going to set that up. So I did manage to get it set up on the scanner lens with the bellows. I had to use all the extension tubes that came with it, and it just about works. So one thing I definitely noticed is that when you have so many different parts screwed together, there is quite a bit of play in it, so I can actually move this a good bit around. And that's just due to the fact that we've got 5 or 6 things threaded together and the lens mounted on a bellows. So using this on the scanning rig is definitely not as steady as using the film carriers from Negative Supply, which is what this thing was built for. It wasn't built for the Valoi system, and honestly using it on a bellows like this isn't really its use case. Okay, so taking a look at some of the scans here, and to be honest there's nothing really remarkable. They're film scans. This is a film holder, so in reality any issue with the scans is more than likely going to be due to the lens itself or the camera you're using, and not down to the film holder. Although looking at some of the scans, there is some weird vignetting going on, or brightness around the outside. However, if we take a look at an actual raw scan, there's no obvious brightness around the outside at all. So I'm not sure what's going on here. I think this might be a conversion issue. This is FPP Sun after all, and it's not really meant for photography. It's an ISO 1 copying film. It's not actually meant for direct photography. So maybe this is just a weird issue with development. Could be a lens vignetting issue, or it could just be a software Negative Lab Pro issue. Apart from that though, the scans look absolutely fine. You can see lots of detail. They're nice and sharp and crisp, as you'd expect from such a fine-grained film, and the macro lens performed well and gave me a good scan. This is a sort of quickly edited image. There's a lot of dust on these negatives for some reason, but I did leave them hanging out overnight, which probably didn't help. I also scanned the same roll using the scanner lens with the EZ35, and I got pretty much the same results as I normally would get. Everything is absolutely pin sharp on that scanner lens. You can see here on the edited version, nice and crisp and even, nice finely defined grain and all of that good stuff. I did notice that the color was a little different on the scans, but I'm going to chalk that up to weird conversions or how the lens is actually transmitting color, because it's the same light source, different taking lenses, but it was the same holder and light source, so it really shouldn't affect it that much. It's a film holder with a light that attaches onto the end of your lens. It's, it did its job. It held a film and I got good scans. And that's it. So this Valoi EZ35 is a really good idea, but it's not actually a new concept. Nikon has made the ES1 and ES2 for their macro lenses and for scanning film and slides years ago. And before that, there was bellows and lenses for duplicating slides onto, slide duplicating film. In fact, there's actually an attachment for this Nikon PB4 bellows that I use to duplicate uncut rolls of 35mm film, and a special bellows Nikkor lens that you can get, which is optimized for this use. But does that mean that the EZ35 is not really worth it? Of course not. It's actually really good to have a complete modern kit like this available for a surprisingly good price. These things are suspiciously cheap, and compared to the bellows, which actually cost more than the entire EZ35 kit, it's pretty obvious which one you would go for if you're looking for scanning options. It really only is a light and a way for film to be passed in front of a lens easily. The limiting factor for this is your camera and your lens that you're using. So as long as you have a decent camera to scan with, which is any digital camera, and you have a decent macro lens that you're able to get your hands on, hopefully maybe a cheap second-hand one or something so you don't spend much money, then you're going to get a lot of value out of something like this EZ35. And when it comes to cost breakdown, something like this, which costs about 250 euros, that's going to pay for itself within 20 rolls of film. And if you're developing yourself and you have uncut rolls, you can then scan it really easily and get even more savings out of it, and you can save yourself quite a bit of time. If you're wanting to get into scanning and all you shoot is 35mm and you don't really plan to move up to 120 or large format, you should seriously take a look at the EZ35 because it is a great option. And really, that's all I have on it. Great little scanning box, very convenient, pretty good if it's what you're looking for.